Hello everybody and welcome back to another 2022 Overwatch League roster breakdown video. We are going to be taking a look at the number 2 overall team from the 2021 season, the Dallas Fuel. Today, this is a roster that made some pretty noticeable changes going into 2022. So let's throw up their roster on the screen real quick. You can see the DPS line. They have Doha, Sparkle, who are returning from last season, as well as Edison and Gurillo, who are joining for this season. In their support line, they have Fielder, who is returning, and Chio, who is a new player for this team. And then the tanks, we have the good old reliables from last season, Hanbin and Fearless. This team obviously finished second overall last season, and they also finished third in the playoffs, losing in the losers finals, or the lower bracket finals. They won one tournament last season, the May Melee, but had the best record in the Western region. So it was a good team. Very good season from them. So let's talk about what their roster is going to look like going into next season and what we can make away from them and whether or not I think they will do as well as it did last season or close to as well as it did last season. So let's start with their DPS line. The biggest problem this team had last season was lack of hit scan talent. They did have Pine on the roster, but it took so long for his visa to process that he never actually played for this team. They had obviously had XC before the season started, and then he stepped away from the game due to injuries and stuff like that. So this team really relied on Doha and Sparkle last season, both of whom are traditionally flex DPS players, or projectile DPS players. Doha, very known for Sombra, but also plays stuff like Reaper and Echo and Mei and Pharah. Sparkle, of course, known for his Genji and his Doomfist, but also plays the Pharah, the Echo. So there's a lot of crossover between them. And we did see Sparkle pick up the Tracer throughout the season. He looked pretty good on the role. He's not the best Tracer we've ever seen, but he did look a lot better on the Tracer as the season progressed. So that was one of the biggest problems last season, right? Doha and Sparkle were incredible players who were very, very good, but there was a very specific type of way that this team had to play. They weren't going to play Cassidy, they weren't going to play Widow, they weren't going to play Ashe. And when those heroes were meta, this Dallas Fuel team had to find a different way to play, and they still did very, very well, and they still looked good doing what they did, because their team is just so talented. But it did, in my opinion, contribute to their shortcomings in the playoffs, and it was a big reason why they were unable to come out on top in the playoffs. Also, a team like Shanghai Dragons were just really, really good. And the Atlanta Reign looked very, very good in that time as well. So I don't think it's the only thing that held them back. I think you can also look at some of the issues they ran into in the tank line, of course, with not as much dominance from Fearless when he had to play Wrecking Ball and Orisa. But DPS specifically, that was one of the biggest problems. They did not have a really reliable hit scan player. And Sparkle, though he was pretty good at Tracer by the end of the season, his Tracer was not elite. It wasn't a kind of carry level hero. It was just kind of if they needed Tracer, he could run it and he could kind of do enough to get by. But in Overwatch 2, a game which will obviously have one less tank, will be probably pretty heavily DPS focused, I think you need to have a very good, strong, dominant level Tracer, which Doha and Sparkle don't really give you. They give you some really good other heroes like Sombra and Doomfist and Genji, but they don't quite give you that really strong Tracer. That is the benefit of adding Edison to this roster. Edison and Gurillo both are known for their Tracer in some capacity, but Edison really is the big Tracer player on this roster. Yes, he also can play some Widow and some Cassidy. We've seen him play a little bit of flex DPS as well, filling in for Pelican at times last season, of course. Edison, formerly a member of the Atlanta Reign. But really, Edison is known for his Tracer. It is one of his best heroes, and I would say it definitively is his best hero. He is at his best when he plays Tracer. It is his best hero. He is very, very good at Tracer, and that is who I expect to be the primary Tracer player for this Dallas Fuel squad going into the season. I don't know how much he will play. I don't know how much the DPS rotation for this Dallas Fuel will actually be utilized. It is a bit of a concern to me with this team that they have 4 DPS players. I highly doubt we will see this team utilize all of them. The exception, and it is the one major exception I can see, is if there is a Zarya meta, I would not be surprised if we saw Sparkle on the Zarya if they needed Doha and Edison on DPS, because obviously we've seen a ton of GOATS players, right, DPS players that played Zarya and GOATS, sometimes will switch back over to the hero in a situation where it's needed. But I do like the addition of Edison. I think he adds a lot of good, well-rounded play, because he is very, very good on the Tracer, but he can also play some of those hit scan roles if you need them. And then you add Grillo, of course, who is a rookie going into this season, who is the dedicated hit scan player, right? He's known for his Widow, he's known for his Ashe, he's known for his Cassidy, and he can run the Tracer if you need him. And I think that this creates a very strong lineup. For those of you unfamiliar with Grillo, he comes from the Contenders team, Team Diamond, which is a team that is pretty good. They have been up and down. They've had some good big names on this team. Obviously, Takoyaki and Flora, who joined the Overwatch League last season, as well as Unique, who is a very, very, very highly regarded main support player, who just this past season joined the Guangzhou Charge, or going into this next season will be playing for the Guangzhou Charge, but he left to go to T1 before joining the Guangzhou Charge. And then also another player this season joining the Overwatch League, Becky, who is joining the LA Valiant, and another Overwatch League player in Alpha Yi, who is with the Hangzhou Spark. So Team Diamond has some pretty big name players, has had some good players go on to the Overwatch League. Miro, former Overwatch League player, well-known main tank, was also a coach for this team before he went to the Hangzhou Spark to be a coach there. So it is a team that has some history. In terms of how well they've performed recently, Grillo, while he was on the team, best thing that they really had was a top 7 finish in Overwatch Contenders 2021 Season 2. They did very well in Contenders Trials, but the team is a kind of team that has some good players on it, but the system itself has not had the same level of success as some of the other teams in Korean Contenders. But there have been some really good star players that have come from that team to the Overwatch League. So we'll see if Grillo is one of those players, but I think he is a very smart addition, because what you're relying on him for, what you're asking Grillo to be, is a hit scan player. That is the primary responsibility that is going to be put on his plate. Can he play Widow? Can he play Ashe? Can he play Cassidy? But the thing that you can fall back on is knowing that Edison also has those heroes in his hero pool, in his rotation, right? And if Grillo doesn't work out, you have Edison to rely on. And if Edison doesn't work out, you have Grillo to rely on. You're basically hoping that one of these two players is going to work on your hit scan role. So I think that this is a very good rotation. Like I said, I have concerns about them actually being able to utilize all 4 of them, like we saw with the Dragons last year, where Erstar just ended up retiring because he really wasn't getting much playtime. For me, it really comes down to a concern of whether or not the Dallas Fuel actually use their hit scan talent when they did pretty well last season without them. I am a little worried about the possibility that this team really heavily just relies on Doha and Sparkle still, despite the fact that I don't think they are the two that they need to be using the most. I think you have to rely on Edison and or Grillo a lot, because you are going to most likely need strong hit scan play this upcoming season. I think it's going to be a huge part of what the Overwatch League is going to evolve into with 5v5. So I am a little bit concerned about how much they will use these players. Now, they were one of the first organizations and first teams to have a finalized roster. They finalized the roster back in October, which is pretty early considering some of the other teams just now kind of announced it. So I do think this is a Fuel roster that knows what they want, had their eyes on players for a little while, and kind of knew who they were going for. So I do have faith that they got the right players, or at least they got players that they truly believe in their talent. I am just curious to see how well it actually works in practice when we didn't see them run hit scan at all last season, because of obviously issues out of their control with visa issues and XC stepping away from the game. So curious to see what happens from them there. That is kind of my big question mark for this team. I think as long as they figure out a rotation that works, this Dallas Fuel roster will be very scary. I think they should be better than last season if that rotation works. It's just I need to see this rotation in practice and in action before I'm ready to say this is going to be a super dominant, super flexible roster that can play anything. But that's my thoughts on the DPS. Let's move on to the support line. Fielder is the first one I'm going to talk about. I don't really need to say much about Fielder. We've seen Fielder pop off 2 seasons straight. He was great on the Paris Eternal, even better on the Dallas Fuel. One of the best flex supports we've seen. His flexibility is incredible. He can play Batiste really well. He can play Ana really well. He can play Zenyatta really well. He can play Moira really well. He was a huge part of their success in the May Melee, a huge part of their success in the June Joust. Obviously didn't win the June Joust, but they still did very, very well in that whole tournament. So I am really confident in Fielder in this flex DPS, or it's not flex DPS, flex support role. It's going to be interesting to see him paired alongside a new main support. In this case, it is Chio. Now, Chio's history with the Overwatch scene is pretty good. He was with Runaway for about a year and a half from the end of 2019 to the middle of 2021 when Runaway kind of disbanded and ceased operations. So he was with Runaway for a while, and then he went on to O2 Blast, who also were a very good team with tons of really good players coming to the Overwatch League over the past several months, several years. Obviously, very recently, you have Finn, Proper, and Kilo all joining San Francisco Shock. You have Teru, who joined the Vancouver Titans. You have Chio with the Fuel now. Vin Dame, who joined the Seoul Dynasty. Although, who went from the London Spitfire to this team, and he is now with the Toronto Defiant. Kalios, who left and then went to the WGS Phoenix team. So, a lot of really big name players from the organization O2 Blast have made their way into the Overwatch League just in the past year or so. So this is a very good team with some very good talent and some players who have done really well for themselves when joining the Overwatch League. So I do think Chio is a player who you should expect to do pretty well when you consider just the immense amount of talent that has come out of this O2 Blast team that has looked really good in the Overwatch League. And it's been some players who I have faith in their ability to perform at a very high level. So I do really think that Chio is a good addition. I'm not super familiar with Chio as a player. I don't know exactly what his strengths are in terms of those double flex support compositions, which I think is where a lot of the big questions are coming from right now. But this is a player who won Contenders Korea Season 2 from last year, right? Won the NetEase Esports X Tournament 2021, right? The winter version of that tournament. Got 3rd place while he was on Runaway at the 2020 Gauntlet, right? This is a player who has had a lot of success, has done very good things in the Overwatch contender scene, and is now coming into a roster which is really good. My one concern is, can he play the BAP, right? In the event that you need a BAP Ana or BAP Zen composition, right? How good is Chio going to be on that role? We know he can play Lucio, we know he can play Mercy, we know he can play Brig. I think Brig is going to be a really big part of this season based on what we kind of saw last season, where Brig got a lot of playtime down the stretch. It was a lot of kind of Brig with a flex support or, a BAP Zen, BAP Ana type composition. So that is really my main question, is how well will his non-Lucio, non-Mercy, non-Brig stand up to the rest of the Overwatch League? But we really don't know yet what the meta is going to be, right? It's really difficult to say for sure. But I do think it is imperative that a number of these main support players do have, in some way, the flexibility to be able to play at least one of those flex support heroes. Because I think it is going to be important going forward that these players know how to at least be able to pick up a BAP. Right, BAP and Brig, I think, are at a point now where you have to be able to play them both as a main support and a flex support. I think you can't get away with that. anymore, not being able to play those two. So those are the two that I will need to see out of him before I'm ready to say this is, once again, an elite level team. But I think going into Overwatch 2, there's going to be a lot more freedom to kind of play comfort roles because there won't really be an established meta. And I think the game is probably going to change quite a bit from tournament to tournament, stage to stage, month to month. The game will probably have a lot of balancing and tuning changes. Who knows, we might start getting new heroes as the game is being played. We might start getting new heroes added into the rotation for the Overwatch League. It's difficult for us to say for sure what's going to happen. So there's a lot of questions, right? But I'm curious to see how much the support meta, where we're seeing a lot of teams roll with double flex supports, as opposed to a flex support and a main support, and some teams are opting to go with just a flex support and a main support. What is going to be the name of the game going forward? And how well will some of these teams that have decided to go with the traditional flex support, main support look adapt to the seemingly changing ecosystem, right? Obviously, it could still be that you need to have a really good Lucio player at all times, because maybe Lucio is really, really important. Or maybe it's just a meta where you just need Brig, and you need BAP, and that's really it. And yeah, occasionally you need to pull out a Lucio, or occasionally you need to pull out a Mercy, but by and large, you need a Brig and a BAP, and maybe main supports are not as good in that way. We don't know yet. It'll be interesting to see how that develops. That's going to be kind of the main thing I have my eyes on broadly across all teams. So I wanted to mention it here because with a team like Shanghai, we've seen Lee Jae-gon play Brig and BAP at a high level. So I have confidence there that he can do that. So I'm not worried about that team. The Dallas Fuel are an example for a team where I haven't seen that yet. And since I don't know exactly what to expect, I have my eyes on it here more so than I did there. But that's kind of an across the league thing. But let's move on finally to the tanks for this team. Hanbin, the off tank, he can play anything. I mean, I don't have any doubts about Hanbin. If they need to play Sigma, if they need to play Zarya, they need to play D.Va, they need to play Hog, they're fine. He can pull it out, and he'll be very, very good at it. One of the best off tanks in the league, an elite level player, among the best we have seen on the Overwatch League stage. Where the main concern for this team is, tank line-wise, is always going to be Fearless. We know Fearless is an incredible Winston and an incredible Reinhardt. He is arguably the best in the league at both of those heroes. But it's his Orisa and his Wrecking Ball that we have seen struggle for the most part when we have seen him in the Overwatch League. He's not necessarily bad at those heroes, but they leave much to be desired, and it feels like the team doesn't play as well around Fearless's Orisa and Fearless's Wrecking Ball. And this was a problem when he was on Shanghai and when he was on Dallas. So it feels like more of a shortcoming of Fearless. He's just not as comfortable on those two heroes as he is when he is on Winston and Reinhardt. And that's understandable. Obviously, the main tanks kind of differ in many, many ways, right? But Winston and Reinhardt, you don't really have to aim with those heroes. Orisa and Wrecking Ball, it is more important. You do need to be able to have a bit better aim. So could that be the reason why? Maybe. I don't think that's the main reason why. I think it just comes down to play style, right? Fearless has been around for a very long time. Winston and Reinhardt have been around the longest of the main tank heroes. And so I just think he's more comfortable on them because he's been playing them for much longer. I don't really think there's much more to it than that. But to me, those are the areas where he needs to improve going into 2022, because unless Hanbin is also a really good Wrecking Ball and Orisa, and we just haven't gotten to see it yet, Fearless is going to be relied on to potentially play those heroes, and potentially play those heroes a lot. Like I said, we don't know yet, right? It's going to be difficult to say for sure if that is who the meta favors, right? We don't know yet. It's too early. But let's say we start off 2022 with a Wrecking Ball heavy meta, right? I would not feel very confident in Dallas on Wrecking Ball specifically to be a dominant team, as I would be, say, a Shanghai or even a Chengdu, who have looked really good on that hero. And even if it's an Orisa meta, I'd favor a team like Atlanta, who I have seen do really, really well on Orisa, than I would a team like Dallas, right? Now, maybe Hanbin is their dedicated Orisa player. We've seen off-tanks like Fury play Orisa in the past, so there's a very good chance that they wouldn't even rely on Fearless's Orisa. They would rely on Hanbin instead. And if that's the case, that's fine, right? That is one of the benefits of being in a one-tank system, if one of your tank players has a shortcoming, you can make up for it with the other tank player a little bit more easily, because then it gives you more flexibility in general, right? Maybe they just decide we only run Fearless if we need Reinhardt or Winston, and maybe Wrecking Ball, because I don't have a ton of knowledge about what Hanbin does on that hero. But maybe they say if it's Orisa, if it's D.Va, if it's Zarya, if it's Roadhog, if it's Sigma, we just run Hanbin, and then in those situations where we need to run those other tank heroes, we just run Fearless, right? It's so up in the air right now to say for sure, but that is kind of the thing that I have my eye on with this team. How well are they going to adapt to a meta where they have to rely on just Fearless in the tank role? I think we're going to see a very interesting change in tank play going into 2022, where we're going to have to see how many of our main tanks in the league, and how many of our off tanks, to be fair, how many just tanks in general, how many of them are really, really, really as good as we think they are when they don't have a buddy backing them up, right? We know, right, Hanbin Fearless are a really good duo. We know Fate and Void are a really good duo. We have seen excellence from players like Fury, like Smurf, like Marvel. How well are these players going to do when they don't have someone backing them up? Are they going to become better because now they're unleashed, they're not trying to save somebody else, and now they can play the way they've wanted to play forever? Or are we going to say some of these players who are a little more aggressive, kind of died quite a bit, are they going to struggle? Are they going to suffer a lot more now because they don't have somebody there to support them that they've had in the past? And they don't have, they have more damage focused on them specifically. It's going to be interesting, and those are kind of the main things I'm looking at with this Dallas Fuel team. How is that DPS rotation going to work? How are these tanks going to look in a one-tank system? Those are my biggest concerns for this team. I still have a lot of faith in this team. I think this team looks still to be among the top of the teams in the league. They look to be cream of the crop, among the best of all the teams in the league. But I do have some concerns about this team, and I do think that if we see the same coaching job we saw from them last season, they'll be just fine. They know how to overcome their shortcomings because Rush is such an incredible coach. But I do have some genuine concerns considering just what kind of flexibility this team lacked last season. Can they make up for that with these new additions? And will their tanks be flexible enough in a one-tank system? Those are my two biggest takeaways. Other than that, I think this roster is absolutely fantastic. I think this roster will still be among the best in the Western region. I still have all the confidence in the world that this is going to be an elite team that should be a favorite to win the whole thing when all is said and done. But at this point, only time will tell. That is all for me for today. That is my thoughts on the Dallas Fuel roster. Let me know your thoughts on this roster in the comments down below. If you agree, if you disagree, I'd love to hear from you, no matter what, because that is what I love doing here. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. I'm going to get out of here for this time. Thank you all once again. And bye-bye.